And sometimes there's not a lot of understanding. Sometimes you just have to get to work and just love people and be like, I don't know how it works. It works. Dr. Bob, so you picked up the Good Old Timers book, yeah?
Yeah, I got, was it Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and
Was it the 1953 convention speech?
yeah, that made me tear up a few times.
That's pretty good, I know.
The first 20 years of AA, it was rough.
You know, one of the things what I really appreciated about it was the service idea, you know, that like that like it's one thing to love yourself and to love other people, but like, man, you know, you just can't get away from having to serve. Like, you got to put in the work. I mean, when you read Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, dude, the amount of effort and work that they put in daily, it was incredible. It's an incredible amount of work.
Yeah, it was their full-time jobs.
I mean, what would you think if you met somebody in the program and they were down at the bars looking for drunks? They were at the hospitals looking for drunks. I mean, what would you think about that person right now?
I mean, I would call him an evangelist, you know?
I know.
That was the thought that kept on popping to my head. It's like, these guys are like religious zealots, but for AA.
Yeah. So that's kind of been one of my big questions, you know, moving along. Like, is there a part of AA that can be benefited through the evangelism side, or have we become so anonymous that we don't want to tell anyone, you know, that we're sober, or we don't want to look for people who are struggling, you know what I mean? Because like, oh, they'll just get it when they're ready. And that's always been the hardest part for me when it comes to sobriety, because like, you know, you can, once you've been in the program enough times, it's like you can start spotting people who are struggling, you know. I mean, you really can.
Yeah.
You know, like whether or not it's like, you know, somebody at a game night, you know what I mean? Or whether it's, you know, somebody who, like, I see it a lot, like people who just post, you know, photos of them drinking on social media a lot, you know? And for every one drink you post on social media, you've probably had 20.
It's probably pretty accurate.
So I don't know, what is your thoughts? Like, do you think that there is some sort of benefit to going out and talking to people about sobriety? Or do you think that that maybe, like, now that AA is firmly established in culture, it's kind of like church, like you should kind of leave your religious beliefs to yourself, and if they want it, they know where to go and get it?
Personally, from my point of view, what I do is I let others know that I'm sober. Like, had a job interview a couple weeks back, and they said, what's your biggest accomplishment? And I looked them dead in the eye. I said, you want the truth? I quit drinking. And that's in a job interview, you know? And then actually they asked what my hobbies were, and I brought up this podcast as one of them, and they're like, oh, you doing a podcast? What's the podcast? I was on Sobriety Daily, and they're like, oh, okay. You know, I don't hide it. I'm right out there in the open. You know, we're supposed to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, and film. You know, so I make sure that people know I'm sober, and I'm willing to help others to get sober, the way I learned how to do it. Do I go door to door, as it were? No. I think that may be. I think a lot of what was pushing them at that time was they knew that they had to share what they had, or they wouldn't get to keep it. But there was no structure for them to share with.
Right.
So if you look at that time, it was just the two of them, or as it grew a little bit, it was 3 or 4 or 5. But there was no network of information. So the only way for them to share it was to go and look for people. And they looked for, uh, I mean, essentially low bottom drunks, which is what they were. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so, and they didn't, it's funny, we think of it as like evangelism because they go and look for people, but then once they find their mark, as it were, they reverse it and they don't evangelize, they just tell them their own experience, and they tell them
Well,
what great things.
that's a powerful thing. So it's like you're going out there, Dr. Bob's going out there and he's looking for drunks. But he's not going out there to look for drunks to tell them that they're wrong. He's going out there to look for drunks to tell them his story about how he got sober. Like it's like it what a better form of evangelism. I love the way that you've structured this entire thing, because I think you're correct that to go and, like, let's say you want to go and tell somebody about anything that you're particularly excited about or that you found to be life changing, to go up there and say how the thing changed your life and to frame the entire conversation that way is a totally different story than to walk up to somebody and frame it up as they're wrong for something. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like, it actually comes to mind because, of course, I'm a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. Grew up with a dad who was a pastor and all that sort of stuff. And there is this funny Bible verse at the end of Revelation that talks about how the people who overcame whatever and at the end of time, they overcame by the blood of the Lamb, i.e., forgiveness, right? And by the word of their testimony or their own story. You know what I'm saying? So overcoming had to deal with acceptance of forgiveness, which of course involuntarily, like or absolutely involves surrender, right? Because you can't be
Yeah.
forgiven towards the thing that you can't surrender to. Like surrender is a prerequisite to forgiveness, I think, on a lot of levels. And so it's like you surrender, but then when you go to talk about it, like nobody ever says like, oh man, you look like you're so down in the dumps. What you need is you need like this. You have to have this. I met my wife and my wife made me so happy, but you need I'm going to tell them that they have to go and get what? In my exact experience, like I'm going to tell them they have to go and get exactly, something. No, I think that you walk them, you say, look, like I needed forgiveness. I needed to surrender. I needed to know how to do this thing. And I think that Dr. Bob was like really willing to surrender. I think he was really willing to do the work. And so what AA does is it provides a format for doing work. So I think that's kind of what you were saying, is that in the beginning, there wasn't a format for sponsorship or whatever. But but quickly, I remember I took somebody through 12 steps a while back, and I walked up to him and I said, hey man, let's go do the 12 steps. And I kind of grabbed him by the shoulders and said, off we go. And I didn't wait for him to say, will you sponsor me? Do you think that there's merit in people walking up and saying, hey, do you want me to sponsor you? Do you think that people need to ask the question?
No, I think there's merit in doing that. My first sponsor did that to me. He was like, hey, do you have a sponsor? I was like, no. And he went, hey, do you want me to sponsor you, for now, or, and, or until you find somebody else or whatever. And that got me into the idea of sponsorship. And otherwise, I wasn't going to ask a dude to the prom. I was too afraid.
So that's to me, that's what Dr. Bob is like. He put the actual service part in, which I think was the hardest part of getting AA going. I think Bill had a lot of good ideas, but when it came down to just grinding, nobody grinded it out quite like Dr. Bob or even like Sister Ignatia. I don't know if you read much about her in the book, or a lot of those kind of supportive characters, just the amount of work that they put in. to uncover this idea of how does one go about serving an alcoholic, because you can't enable an alcoholic. So how do you help somebody for whom most of the time when you help them, you enable them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was constantly amazed. Probably the things that made me tear up the most were the non-alcoholics who helped, and helped with this crazy idea that, you know, it took one alcoholic talking to another. It took them telling their story to another person for, I mean, some of the stuff that they made decisions on doing, these are suggestions. That was, I mean, I've pulled that out, you know, many times on somebody when just starting to talk to them about AA, is I tell them, and remember, these are only suggestions. You do you know, because you can't force an alcoholic to do anything.
Right.
But you can suggest something and they might take that suggestion. And they're much more likely, if they've listened to your story and go, oh yeah, I drink like that. Oh, you're doing better. I mean, you look like you're doing good. Maybe I should listen to this person. That was brilliant.
Oh, that's the power of suggestion. I remember I had somebody who had been sober maybe for 2 months. And this is back when I was young. I was 20, 24, 25 maybe. And he had me take the AA test. You know what I'm talking about? The little 20 question test. And I remember that it was like, if you answered yes to 4 of these or something, you might be an alcoholic. But in my mind, like, I only answered yes to 18 out of 20. So clearly I wasn't an alcoholic yet. I didn't answer yes to everything, right? But you know, he suggested that I take the test. I took the test, and then, you know, a decade later, it did matter. Like, I still remember taking that test. So you know, and it does matter, because it doesn't. All somebody has to, sometimes they just have to figure out, like, well, maybe I do have a problem. You know what I mean? Maybe, you know, maybe that's the case. And so you can say, like, you know, I mean, here's what I did. You know, if you don't know if you're an alcoholic or not, I suggest that you take the test, or like, I suggest that you take the test, or I suggest that, you know, you consider sponsorship, or I suggest that maybe you consider. What was the thing that Bud said to you? You know, can you not drink for a week, or?
Yeah, it was, you know, just try not drinking for this week, and then, and we'll meet next week, you know. And
yeah,
you know, it was just a week. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't forever. It was just 7 days.
You know, I remember, like, for me, okay, so for me, when I first got sober, there's no way. If somebody said, can you not drink for a week? My answer would have been a hard pass. But, you know, Bo said to me, like, can you not drink for 8 hours? And that wasn't too hard, because I think I was still drunk.
Yeah, I don't think there was a whole lot of time that I was truly sober for probably 15 years.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like, could you take this for a week? No, but I could take it 8 hours. And then it was like, okay, well, you know, it's 8:30 now. The next meeting is at 7. So can you make it 22 and a half hours? Okay, I can do that. You know? And then
they only had meetings once a week back in those first 20 years, like once a week at somebody's house. I mean, you know,
that's
Ray,
crazy.
Ray, back in the day when he got sober, which was what, like 50 years ago, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah,
right. 40 years ago. Anyway, we'll see you next Thursday. That's it.
Well, you would have had to hang out with friends, right? You would have had to have gone out and gone hiking with friends, or gone and done something with homies to like okay, so like take Dr. Bob. Everybody hung out at Dr. Bob's house, right? Like everybody just hung out, like they hung out there, they hung out at the lake, they went for a drive, they were, and so they were working together, they were, building stuff together. And so there's a real benefit in the long run to maybe, and this is kind of thing I've noticed even like with the hiking group, like there's a real benefit. Maybe it's like less, maybe you only need 1 or 2 formal meetings a week, but hanging out with other alcoholics 3 or 4 times a week outside of a meeting, I think that there's some real health benefits there. Getting off of Facebook or Instagram or whatever kind of whatever place, because then you actually are out there making friends, you're actually doing this deal, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for me personally, I know that the social aspect was huge. I could go to a meeting at 5:30 and then by 7 o'clock start getting drunk, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if I got done with that meeting and by 6:45 we were headed to dinner as a group, and we didn't get done with dinner till 9:30, well, I mean, I should go to bed so that I can get up and go to work tomorrow morning. Now I'm sober that day, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. So that to me, that's the magic of Dr. Bob's. And one of these funny things, I remember I was in Akron and I actually went to Dr. Bob's home and all that sort of stuff. And then, but I went to a meeting while I was there, and the guy who spoke, he actually um, wore a suit, stood behind a podium, spoke on a actual microphone, and then it was so I liked this. I enjoyed the idea of the formal meeting, right, with the like getting together and hanging out afterwards thing, rather than just a series of endless informal meetings. And so I think that in a sense, where Dr. Bob went right was he went, I'm going to prioritize relationships, relationship building, getting to know people, just really doing the deal in the service side. Because that's the main point that Dr. Bob brings up in that speech was, he's like, I had talked to all these good people, I had read the good book, I had done all this good stuff, but what Bill brought to me was the idea of service, and I don't think it was the idea that he wanted to serve because like he had to. I think the idea was that if he didn't serve, it wouldn't work.
You have to share it. I mean, he was already a doctor, so
Yeah.
He's already a do-gooder by nature. There's a story in the book where a nurse dropped a specimen and he took the blame for it. He was just a do-gooder by nature.
Yeah.
But being that kind of person and doing acts of service aren't necessarily the same thing. And doing it consciously and with an effort to help another alcoholic just because you can.
Well, that's interesting you bring up about the Dr. Bob being a doctor thing, because at some point, when you go to Dr. Bob's home, there's just stacks and stacks of, there's piles of books everywhere, all over the house. They just have them roped off. It's like, this is a pile of books that he had. And it's interesting because at some point you can't justify or rationalize your alcoholism anymore, or why you're an alcoholic, or how you became one, or why people are, or how they came to be. Like, at some point you have to stop rationalizing, justifying. You have to realize there's no amount of book knowledge you can get that's going to make you understand everything. And sometimes there's not a lot of understanding. Sometimes you just have to get to work and just love people and be like, I don't know how it works. It works. I can't tell you. I can tell you how it works, like what you need to do structurally speaking, but I can't tell you you know, what side of the, you know, epigenetic, you know, genetic chromosome is going to switch from, you know, now you're non-alcoholic, and, you know, now you're not a weirdo, you know, or whatever. But like, you can't do that. How it works? Well, you know, you get together, you accept other people, you allow them to accept you, and you stop trying to justify, rationalize, or figure out like what it is. And I think that's like, I think, but Dr. Bob finally just called it quits and was like, look, I'm going to stop trying to understand my problem. I'm going to stop trying to like jargonize it and like classify it. Like, I got a problem. And what I'm finding out is that the more I love and accept and serve other people, the less of a problem I have.
Yeah. Makes me think about, you know, they didn't know, and hell, we still don't know what exactly in AA, you know, is it the 12 steps? Really, it was the 6 steps of the Oxford group. And then Bill broke them into 12 because he thought 6 big steps would be hard for an alcoholic to take. So he cut them into 12 smaller steps.
Yeah.
But, you know, those 12 steps, I've watched somebody do all 12 steps and then go get drunk.
Yeah.
But doing the 12 steps doesn't keep you sober. And then I've seen people who don't do the steps and stay sober for years. So, you know, that, you know, it's not necessarily that, but I've seen people who, you know, did the 12 steps and, you know, then stayed sober for years and years. And then I wonder, they go out after 20 years or 10 years, seen both. And I look at those and I wonder, what is it? And it makes me think about the service thing, because, you know, those people have generally done the 12 steps, oftentimes more than once. What are they missing in the device that is being sober? And I wonder if it's service, and that's that philanthropic service, that giving of yourself just because you can. You know, oftentimes we'll call it giving back, or paying it forward, but that, I think that helping another alcoholic and helping honestly in your daily lives, you know, we practice these principles in all of our affairs.
Yeah, well said.
And really starting to look at that, and they made AA, the founders made AA their entire lives, but practicing these principles in all of our affairs means being of service everywhere you can be of service, you know, taking responsibility for your actions everywhere, you know, whether it's at work or home or in your love relationships, you know, all of these things are just for, what do we call it? Right sizing. Was it ritual humiliation you like to say? Where
yeah, right.
become,
Ritual humiliation.
You become
Yeah.
small, and that allows you to grow.
Yeah.
And that,
for those of you guys who don't know, ritual humiliation is, a lot of people say that, oh, I don't want to go to AA because I don't want to declare, hi, my name is Drew and I'm an alcoholic. The joy, though, of the ritual humiliation is to say, hi, my name is Drew and I'm an alcoholic. And then when Brian says,
hi, my name is Brian and I'm an alcoholic,
we now are the exact same in terms of we're on the same path. It's a declaration that we're on the same pilgrimage. And so now we can actually, now that we're the same, it doesn't matter what occupations we have. It doesn't matter what our marital status is, or whether we have kids or not, or wherever we are in our life. Just by both declaring I'm an alcoholic and I'm an alcoholic, we're saying we're on the same journey. And now we can actually start exchanging values, and the judgment part can actually decrease. And so now we can actually get to work, because it's hard to serve somebody that you're silently judging. And it's hard it's hard to be loved by somebody who you think either you're better than, or somebody who you think is better than you. And so when we all come together and we all say, hi, my name's so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic, we allow for those type of interactions that when we go about our daily lives, it's a lot harder to have that kind of guard dropped so low. But for that 1 hour during the program, everybody gets to drop their guard. Everybody gets to be in this kind of collective environment where we can exchange values. And then we can find out how can I serve this person. Maybe they're going to share a story that now I know where I can actually jump in, and they will let you serve them, or I will allow somebody to serve me and to help me, right? Because I know that they've got a piece of that story that I'm missing. They got a puzzle piece. They've solved a piece of that Rubik's cube that I don't have solved yet. You know, like, I don't know how many times I called you, Brian, to say like, hey, what do I do about this feeling? And you're like, oh, that's just a feeling. And it's, by the way, I'm just going to let you know, I know you think that emotion's going to last forever. It's not. It's not going to last forever. I promise, even though you feel like it's going to last forever, it's not going to last forever. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's definitely, I'm definitely going to feel this way for forever. I don't think you understand me, Brian.
I had a day like that yesterday. Yesterday was a solid, like, having feelings day all freaking day. And I'm just like, you know, from when I got up basically till when I went to bed, I had lots of feelings. They were all over the place. And, you know, it's been 6 years. It's not like, you know, I haven't done this for a while now. By most medical professionals' opinion, I would be cured.
Is that right? How many, is it 2 years?
It's 2 or 5. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there is a cured of alcoholism, technically.
Oh, I can tell you right now, if I had a drink, I'd become an alcoholic tomorrow again. Cured my ass. There's no cure for whatever it is I got. I can tell you right now, there's no cure.
In remission. I think in remission would be a much more accurate description.
Sure, eternally.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't think cured is ever in that. Well, and that's one of those things that Dr. Bob said in that farewell speech. You know, I don't think I'm any closer from a drink today than anyone else in this room is. You know, and I definitely agree with that. Like, I never feel like I'm not still close, you know? Like, absolutely. There's definitely still times where I think, oh man, this would be so great right now. But then but then what stops me is that then I wouldn't be able to do all the fun things I get to do in the program anymore. So one of the things that stops me is the fact that I enjoy serving. I don't want to go and delete the podcast. I like doing it. You know, if I go and have a drink tomorrow, it's not like I have to delete it, but I mean, at the same point, it's different, right? So,
as somebody who's
go ahead.
As somebody who's gone out after having a belly full of AA, I can tell you that if it were my podcast and I were to go out, I would not touch it. I probably wouldn't delete it. I probably would just close it and it wouldn't open again until I stopped drinking again. Because that was my experience with my whole AA, the people I've met, the groups, you know, the social functions. If I got drunk, I did not interact with them. It was too embarrassing, you know?
Yeah.
I felt like I'd let them down, like I'd, you know, the AA will ruin your drinking. I don't know if it ruined my drinking. My drinking was never very good to start with, but it definitely made me super self-conscious about it.
Oh, I can't think of anything worse. Well, there is nothing worse than being both drunk and self-aware / self-conscious at the same time. Like, the whole point of drinking is so that you're not self-conscious. And so suddenly when you go to drink, to get rid of that feeling, and it just makes you more self-conscious. Oh, it just sounds that sounds like Kurt's story about you know, it not working anymore. and going to 5
Hmm.
different bars downtown, and then it's just not working. Like, what's not working? Well, what's not working is that you're not able to check out. Like, there comes a day for all of us where, like, in our drinking, you just it stops working. It stops making you able to disconnect. It actually stops you from being able to disconnect. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is to disconnect in the drinking, to not have to feel all those feelings.
Yeah,
And
I
if you're
mean, at
lucky,
the
then
end
one day
there, I
yeah.
say at the end there, I had to black out. Like I had to black out, and I stayed blacked out for a week, you know, because if I wasn't blacked out, I was having, well, all those feelings I was hiding from.
Yeah, there's no other way around it, right?
Yeah, which I can understand people who get to the point where they're, drunk 24/7 because they're. I mean, I know I was. You're
You got to
trying to stay in that numb.
stay in that permanent disconnect. Yeah. So that's the whole point, is that as you get through service, as you get through working hard, as you get through all of these phases, it starts to work. But there is a certain amount of realizing that when the going gets really, really tough, sometimes it's the coffee commitment that keeps you
Hmm.
going. Sometimes it's the secretarying that meeting. So getting that service commitment for your group. I love the coffee commitment. I don't think enough people have it. It's really needed. The cookie commitment guy. I love the guy who brings cookies. You know, the secretarying, the meetings, like getting involved, because that while you may not need the meeting, somebody else does. And I was thankful that a whole bunch of people were there in at the Alano Monday or Tuesday night meeting. I don't think anyone else needed the meeting that night. Not like I did, but they were there. You were there, everyone was there. So to me, that's the service part. Service is doing the work when you don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that it took so long for me to learn to come early and to stay late. And that's where that social network starts to build. And it took so long. It was so rough, you know. Get there 1 minute before the meeting starts, leave 1 minute after it ends, and miss the social aspect that Dr. Bob and those old timers, they got. They got that you needed that social network. You needed the group. They talk a lot about the group helping them, taking a group conscience on things. I mean, heck,
Yeah.
our hiking group decided that the hiking group should be a closed group, and
Yep.
that was a group conscience. And
Yep.
regardless of how I feel about it, that's the group conscience. And okay, it is what it is, and
Yeah.
accepting that that's what the group has decided, and that the group's probably got a better idea than Brian does. So just letting that be the truth.
Yeah, there is definitely something about putting the program above you, putting the group above you, learning how to submit to the group, submit to serve, submit to each other, submit to love, that kind of thing. I agree. I couldn't agree more. Any closing thoughts on Dr. Bob before we wrap this thing up?
The number of lives they touched was amazing, and I always have to put a plug in for the large doses of sedatives that he was on, and that to remember that one of our two founders was a drug addict. and that drugs are a part of his story. It's okay to talk about drugs. He did all the time. That was not a hidden thing. It was not a non-AA related issue. Drugs, it's okay. Drugs are part of the problem. Dr. Bob, that was how he got through surgeries, proctology surgeries, first thing in the morning. So yeah.
That's good. I think the thing I take away from Dr. Bob's story is it's work sometimes, and that's okay. Sometimes you're sitting there and you're doing step 5 with a sponsee, and they're reading you their story, and you want to grab that piece of paper and roll it up and smack them across the face and throw it back at them and say, go do it again. Like this sucks. Go do it again. And sometimes it's work, and sometimes you're chasing people down, and sometimes you're sitting there with somebody and you work with them for a long time, and they text you back and you say, how's your sobriety going? And they text you back and they say, could be better, ... And you don't even know what that means. And your job is not to get mad or get frustrated and not want to throw the book at them. It's just, okay, are we starting at 0? Where are we at? And just committing beforehand to just love them right through it. So that's that.
Yeah.
If you like the podcast, hit subscribe. Otherwise, I'm Drew, and that's Brian, and we are Sobriety Daily. So have a good one.